Welcome to this video, which explains use of a spreadsheet which can be used to quickly rename .msg files. .msg files are native file format emails as stored in Microsoft Outlook. There are many different ways in which you might come to have .msg files in Windows Explorer. So for example, on the left hand side over here, I've got Microsoft Outlook open, and on the right hand side over here, I've got a folder in Windows Explorer. If I just selected a couple of the emails in Outlook and dragged and dropped them into Windows Explorer, you'll see that they show up as individual .msg files, and you can tell that from the .msg file extensions that you can see on the end of each of these files. You might also drag and drop .msg files into Windows Explorer from an email that you received with .msg files as attachments, or somebody might give you a large library of .msg files. Typically when .msg files are placed into Windows Explorer, they will have unhelpful file names like the ones we see over here. And once the .msg files are in the Windows Explorer folder, it's helpful to give them useful file names, ideally indicating the date, time, sender, and email subject line, with the data arranged in the file names such that the files sort into date order. For example, I would change the current listing of files to be something like this. Available for download is a spreadsheet that contains a Visual Basic macro that performs quick renaming of message files such that each message file is named in the file naming format shown here. You must have Excel installed to use the spreadsheet, and you must also have Microsoft Outlook open and running on your PC when the macro runs, because the macro uses Outlook to help extract the email metadata needed for renaming, and so this spreadsheet is only for PC users who have both Excel and Outlook running. So with that in mind, I will now show you how the tool works in practice, and then after that I'll go through details about use of the tool and how to set it up. So coming back to that folder containing the message files with unhelpful file names, all you need to do is select the folder path in the address bar, hit Ctrl+C to put that folder path on the clipboard, and then open the Excel spreadsheet that runs the macro. In my case, it's pinned to the taskbar, so I'll run the spreadsheet, and you see already it's renamed the files. The macro can also be run on a much larger collection of message files, although it will take a bit longer to run if that's the case. It is also possible to rename just select message files in a folder. So if I go back to that same folder with the unhelpfully named emails, and I select just one email, hold down the Shift key, right-click, select Copy as Path, and then run the macro, you'll see that little name, just that single file, leaving the others unchanged. To show what happens if there are duplicate copies of a message file in the folder, I'll make a couple of copies of that one, which was the last one in the list. I'll then select the folder path and run the macro to rename all of them. And what you'll notice is it puts number suffixes on the end of the file names, and then if you don't need the duplicates, you can go ahead and delete all of the ones with the number suffixes. You will have noticed that I've been opening the spreadsheet by accessing the shortcut that is pinned to the jump list associated with the Excel icon on the taskbar, but that's not necessary. You can just open the spreadsheet from wherever it is saved after you've put either the folder path or select file paths onto the clipboard. The renaming spreadsheet does have a settings page which allows the user to define certain aspects of how the renaming is done. If there is a folder path or file path on the clipboard when the macro runs, then the user will not be able to access the settings sheet because, as just demonstrated, the macro will run when the spreadsheet is opened, look for files to rename, and then quickly shut down the workbook after renaming the files. If you want the workbook to stay open so that the settings can be adjusted, instead of putting a folder path or file paths onto the clipboard, you should put the words Settings Adjust onto the clipboard. Note that there is no space between the two words and no spaces before or after, and in fact there's no punctuation at all. But if that phrase is on the clipboard, then the macro will stop on the settings sheet in order to allow you to adjust the settings. So coming back to the settings sheet and looking at the available options on the top left, you will see that there's flexibility as to what characters are used in and around the date. In cell C4, you can specify the characters to appear between the year and month of the date and between the month and day portions of the date, and those are indicated by the red question marks up here in cell B3. Consider using dashes for those to create visual separation between the different portions of the date. In cell C5, you can specify the character to appear between the end of the date and the start of the description portion of the file name, and that would be the blue question mark location as shown in cell B3. Consider using an underscore there to create a visual separation and also to act as a delimiter if you wish to later separate out the date portion using the text to columns tool in Excel. Then moving down to row 8 and below, there is a space to deal with the issue that there are certain characters that are prohibited in file names. For example, these 9 characters are not permitted in file names on a Windows computer. It could be that some of those characters may be included in email subject lines, and so they must be filtered out when renaming files. In column D, you can specify what you want those prohibited characters to be replaced by. And if there are any other characters you wish to not appear in file names, there's a space below where you can enter those, and again, you specify in column D what you want those replaced by. When the macro runs, it will use the email metadata, including the date and time sent, the sender name, and the email subject line to rename the files, but it will follow the character replacement rules specified in this sheet to remove unacceptable or unwanted characters. Moving further down, in cell D35, you can enter yes or no to control whether the email sender name is included in the renamed file. You may want to exclude that if the names contain foreign language characters that Windows may not properly recognize. In cell D36, you can enter yes or no to control whether the email subject line is included in the renamed file. You may want to exclude that if the subject lines might contain unusual characters, or if the subject lines are long and might cause unacceptably long file names. But in cell D39, you can specify the maximum length of characters for the subject line, and then the macro will truncate subject lines to that length, and so avoid very long file names. But if you consider randomly truncated subject lines undesirable, then you could eliminate them by putting no into cell D36, as mentioned before. After editing the settings, be sure to click Save to save the changes. Then you can shut down the workbook and put a folder path or file paths onto the clipboard so that the renaming macro runs when the file is next opened. If you ever want to further edit the settings, just put Settings Adjust back onto the clipboard and open the spreadsheet, and you'll be brought back to the settings page. Although the renaming spreadsheet takes a few minutes to set up with the user's preferred settings, it can save a lot of time renaming message files and can be very useful for those who like to review emails in chronological order. Well, that's all. If you use the spreadsheet, I hope you like it. Thanks. Bye.